So whenever we're experiencing any kind of pathology, any kind of symptoms to do with our female body, there is a whole array of different conflicts and experiences that could be at the root of that kind of expression, whatever it might be that we're experiencing in our body, whether that's pain, discomfort, some particular diagnosis. Quite often the physical experience is something to do with pain and discomfort, whether that's with our menstrual cycle, our reproductive organs, or our experience of being a woman in our body, and our access to pleasure and our relationship to our sexuality. And there's, as I said, different factors, different tissue types, different conflicts related to those different stages of evolution that I have briefly touched on before. And predominantly though, we're dealing with a lot of first stage conflicts, so that's to do with survival, what is vital for me. Some third stage conflicts which are to do with self-devaluation, so my value as a woman, my identity as a woman, my power and my capability as a woman. And also fourth stage, which is relational and social, so a kind of relational, interrelational dynamic happening there and how we're feeling, probably most often with our partner or with men in general, but it could be also more broad than that. Another big kind of factor or influence on pathologies to do with the female body and our women's health is that we need to also really look sort of at our lineage, because a lot of the time the beliefs that we have about being a woman, our value as a woman, what it means to be a woman in the particular culture and society that we grew up in. So a way that we can work with resolving issues with the female body is also to kind of do some work and some protocols around this sort of transgenerational inheritance of beliefs, and we can look at the suffering of the women who have come before us and the way that that suffering has translated into certain beliefs and the way that those beliefs have been passed down, probably mostly subconsciously. Maybe in some cases they're things you heard, like, I don't know, it's hard to be a woman, or women have to suffer, or to be a woman is painful. You might have literally heard some of those sentences being spoken in your family home as a child, but mostly they're implicit. They're just, we've absorbed these messages and these beliefs in a more subconscious, imprinted kind of way, just through the way we've observed and unconsciously absorbed and taken in the way that, for example, our mother related to her body, or how she communicated to us about the different stages and phases that our body was going to go through as a woman. So we can really work on feeling and becoming more present to and aware of those underlying subconscious beliefs that might be there, and working on them, working on the origin of how we've experienced that in our life, and therefore reinforced it, and therefore look for the evidence to keep proving to ourselves that that's true. Or maybe in some cases things that we haven't actually directly experienced, but it's more like this undercurrent, this sort of background, fear or shame or guilt that's present, and we're not even really sure why or what it relates to in terms of a direct experience that we've had. And then looking at women's health, we need to sort of also look at the cycle, the menstrual cycle as a whole. And it's really interesting to approach the whole menstrual cycle in the way that we're sort of flowing through these different energies, these different seasons, these different strengths and gifts. And this is talked about quite a lot already in the sort of women's health space, and lots of like menstrual cycle awareness work that's being done. I don't know, in the last, probably since the 80s, it's become more and more common and known to talk about the menstrual cycle in these ways. But if that is something new to you, then I recommend looking into it more. There's plenty of resources out there, and it's sort of looking at this like the arc that we go through as we go through, you know, whatever it is, our 28-day cycle, give or take a week, because every woman can be unique in how many days her cycle is. But there's these broader kind of stages that happen. So from the end of bleeding up until ovulation, we're sort of in this spring, you know, maiden, new beginnings kind of stage. We have ovulation, we have the mother archetype there, we have summer, we have, you know, this sort of outward energy, giving, being more extrovert or being more seen and out in the world. Then we kind of come into the post-ovulation, premenstrual time, which is like autumn, the enchantress, starting to come more inward, starting to sort of see what might be needed to change in our life, what we need to let go of. You know, and this is the phase in general that most women kind of struggle with, and that's probably because a lot of these things are coming up and there's not a lot of space and there's not a lot of acknowledgement of also the gifts of that time, like a woman speaking her truth, or also not giving all her energy into nourishing others, but coming back and being more present and being with herself. It's also a great time for creativity. And then we come into the time when we bleed, winter, the crone, the wise woman, and we're really more wanting to stay with ourselves and a more internal, private, introverted kind of space. And obviously that doesn't really fit with the world that we live in, where we're expected to turn up, you know, mostly every day the same and with the same, you know, energy and the same willingness and wantingness to be there for other people and, you know, and work and do all the things we need to do. So we can't really expect that the outside world's going to adapt to that, although maybe with this more and more awareness, eventually structures and, you know, there can be more awareness of that and the outside world can adapt to it, but we can't hold our breath waiting for that to happen at this point. So it's also about just having this intimacy with ourselves and this awareness of ourselves and seeing how we can bring the gifts of each stage, you know, to what we need to do in our everyday life in a particular stage. So it's not that we have to suddenly cancel every plan when we're bleeding, but, you know, if we can, great. But, you know, things that need to be done, but can we still bring, you know, that quietness? Can we still do it in a way where we're connected to that part of ourselves? So, I mean, there's lots to say about that, and that's not really my forte, although I have been really interested in that kind of world and that perspective for some years. But in terms of this relating to then pathologies of the menstrual cycle, it's interesting to see how there could be phases that we're struggling with and what that might be telling us about ourselves and how we might be able to do different work and protocols and a therapeutic approach to helping to bring more flow and harmony into the way that we connect to each of those phases of our cycle, the way we transition through them. And then how that's also going to relate to like how hormones are expressed. Because if we're struggling, for example, in the time when we're sort of more in our masculine phase, just on a hormonal level, you know, that can be, then there's something to work with our relationship to the masculine. And if we're struggling more in the time when we're more in our you know, feminine phase of the cycle, then we can, you know, work on our relationship to that. So everything is giving us information about ourselves, about our beliefs, our experience, what we've inherited, what we, you know, believe about ourselves and the world and who we are. And these are all things that we can work on in biodecoding in many ways, but that's what I'm offering to help bring us into a more easeful, joyful experience of our cycle and not have those imbalances eventually continue to adapt into, you know, pathologies that are either more serious in terms of if they go on and on and on for a long time, what they could evolve into, or just you know, mere discomfort and inability to be in the world and to feel good in our body and, you know, to not suffer, to not be in pain. An interesting pathology is also the one of like yeast infections when we're dealing with something that's involving a fungus. It's to do with our process of grieving, because if we look at fungus in nature, it's decomposing dead matter. So there's something to do with death, which cannot be like always, it could be, but not necessarily a literal death, but something that has ended, that we haven't quite allowed ourselves to finish that process of either grieving the ending of something or fully acknowledging it or allowing it to finish in some way. And so the fungus is coming to help us process that. Also with HPV and problems of the cervix, they're to do with, it's a 4-stage pathology to do with being chosen by our partner. It's to do with being prioritised within the couple. And it's a sexual and emotional frustration at that. So it's not sexual frustration in the way of like not satisfying sexual experience, but a frustration in terms of this relational dynamic of not feeling prioritised and chosen by the partner, by the male. A lot of the time with things to do with the reproductive organs that are touched in terms of sexuality, you know, our body, it is to do with this conflict of contact. So it's either the contact that we had that we didn't want, or it's feeling separated from a contact that we do want. And this is the case in most conflicts actually, but we can really see it in these pathologies of the reproductive system, which is this double bind. So often we're kind of pulled between what is the desire, what we want to feel, and then lots of different beliefs or experiences that tell us that's wrong, that's dangerous, there's consequences for that, and this is what's creating the conflict. And then this is what's creating our body to adapt, and this is what's creating some kind of physical symptom expressing that conflict. So it's really a matter of going into the feelings, going into, you know, these codes of what the symptom is guiding us towards the sort of nature of the conflict might be, going into the experiences that we can remember that we've had, and allowing ourselves to find a resolution in those experiences, in those beliefs, choosing new beliefs, choosing a way to see our cycle in a different way, to see our body in a different way, our reproductive system, and connect deeply with ourselves as a woman, with our sexuality. There's just so many layers here. There's so many experiences of women in the past in our own life that can be uncovered and healed and resolved and integrated, and hopefully to the point where we feel joy and excitement and pleasure and power and value in who we are as women, in a female body, and all that that has to offer us in terms of our experience to be here on planet Earth, and can offer, you know, society as well, and contribute in different ways to what men can contribute. And I think we really need to honour what the strengths and the gifts of the feminine are, and however that is expressed through you. And that's not a fixed, determined thing. That's each individual woman tapping into her own expression of her female body and who she is as a woman in this world. And that will see a beautiful world with everyone thriving. So if you have any questions, let me know. And if there's anything you would like to work on in terms of your female health, your female body, your experience of being a woman in the world, please reach out and we can do something together. Much love.